Welcome back, one and all, to the Christmas story of a century. We're back in the compound. We're here ready to read more of the Hellraiser holiday special. And if you didn't have a chance to watch the first video, you are definitely going to want to do that. With this book, all the short stories are tied together with one intermingling story about three Cenobites sent on a Christmas mission, if you will, to a desolated soup kitchen where everybody has been slewn, splattered everywhere, and among all these dead bodies are a bunch of counterfeit configurations that these three Cenobites must figure out where their origin came from. Now, the first story dealt with a man named Steve. This man was a marketer for a toy company, and upon actually opening a Lamarcand cube for himself, he is forced to make a deal with the devil himself, or at least two other Cenobites that we've never seen before. He ends up having his company make a couple of these mock-up Lamarcand configurations that apparently still have the power of hell imbued within them. But inevitably, none of this works out. The man loses the deal as these two Cenobites come into fair competition with him and make their own little action figure. And while that story was kind of lighthearted, kind of funny, kind of a Ferris Bueller-esque kind of deal, this next one coming up is more real, a lot more sad, and a lot less Christmassy feeling. So in order to bring up the holiday cheer in this video, I came with, I forgot to turn them on. I came with Christmas lights, I came with these lovely stockings, and I came with my nice pointed hat. And I could not be more ready to issue this second story. Now, continuing from the first, Steve is sent back to the clutches of these Cenobites, and somehow this fake mock-up Lamarcand configuration has made its way to a soup kitchen. Now, upon somebody opening this thing, or it just opening itself, it has not really been said, and this is also a big factor with these three Cenobites face, the librarian, and the armorer trying to figure out how all this even happened. We are greeted to the three in the box itself once again. And before they find the next configuration in this room, the armorer is about to have a little bit of shooting practice. Alright, Facey, pull! Bastard troublemaking plastic ass made in some third world pistol bogus box. And we see the armorer pull out this giant machine gun. Now, I always thought that the Cenobites were more of a melee build kind of character. Apparently this is not true, and the armorer actually does have guns. Now, how he got these things, if he made them himself, as his name is the armorer, I have no idea. But he blasts this box into 1,000 different pieces, and him feeling a little better, we see the librarian looking back down at her book and just saying, this is not helping us. That was practically a piece of evidence, and you've just destroyed it. And while the armorer does not care, he just tells him that he's just blowing off a little bit of steam. We see Face kneeling down to the floor, and what he sees there is a small gray statue next to a bunch of skinned people. Your personal satisfaction aside, we are still no closer to the truth of what happened here tonight, with the exception of textbook quality skinning, of course. And we actually see Face grab this. Somehow I feel like every time I gotta mention Face's name, he's also talking about somebody else's face, and it's very confusing, and it just makes it sound completely wrong. But he kneels down, and he grabs a face off the ground, an actual skinned one. I'm not talking about the guy, I'm talking about a guy's face. And Face, once again, being the thespian and actor that this man is, holds it up to his head, and does a terrifying set of improv. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. Very funny. And while the armorer and Face are just having their fun, we see the librarian looking down at this little gray statue, and she has no idea what this thing is. She doesn't know how these configurations are getting here, and she doesn't know how these things are actually being opened, as they're just kind of lying around the tree, and it doesn't appear that anybody's actually touching or meddling with these things. It just seems like they're letting the forces of hell open for themselves. But no record of the Gollem statue ever being approved for service in Leviathan's war on the flesh. It reeks of hellish essence, and yet has no counterpart in the unholy catalog. Like the counterfeit puzzle box, an anomaly among our Lord's configurations, therefore representing a lack of control in comparison to the pit's other strategies. I tell you to no fear, for behold, I bring you debased tidings of great misery. And this is the introduction to our second short story in the book, a very interesting one, and like I said, a very sad one, alright? This one is not fun, it's not lighthearted, and basically nobody in the story gets vengeance for themselves, and it's honestly been a harder one to do a video on. It takes place in Albany in 1938, and it's about a small Jewish family, a man and his son, who are just kind of dealing with the people around them. Now, these people are open supporters of Adolf Hitler in the time that they're in. These people are all about white supremacy and white nationalism, and all they do is constantly harass this Jewish family and their people all around. And with the young boy getting sick of all this, he starts getting sick of his religion and having to constantly wait around for God himself to do something about this, and the father just wants to teach him that no man should be able to inflict pain or misery upon anybody else, and it is not not their place to take action against this. And with all the tension around them, they just can't really seem to quite get along or meet eye to eye. How many times do I have to tell you? Straighten your talus. It was Grandpa's. Show some respect. Why do we have to go to prayer every morning? Because the rabbi works on commission. Such a question. We respect God, that's why. And this golem of yours, you are far past bar mitzvah. Too old for such games. Were the golems real, Papa? When the rabbis made them, did they avenge the Jews like the stories say? Have you ever seen one? Questions. Have I ever seen one? No. But then again, I've never needed one. I wish a golem would come and kill all the Cossacks and the Nazis and treat them like they've treated us. How you talk, Jacob Goldberg. Avenger of the Jews. God decides such things, not men. And after much more frustration with this young boy and his father, we see them going inside, and what his dad is about to do is show him this small little box that he says has been in his family for nearly 400 years, since the Inquisition times, and this part is very fascinating as I'm pretty sure this is tied to the very first Hellraiser story I covered, and makes me extremely excited that they're actually tied together like this. Now, the first one was about a crusader who went all through France to bring this holy relic back to his castle, and it ended up completely decimating the entire thing and left only his wife and a baby left alive. Now, if you haven't seen that video, go check it out. It's by far my biggest video ever. Somehow the YouTube algorithm was just like, here you go, everybody in the world. And it was a very exciting time in my YouTube career, and probably what brought a lot of you here. So thank you all for that. I can't tell you what an exciting night that was as I was out on a pub crawl, just watching all the new people fly in. But that's neither here nor there. But after Jacob's father is telling him all about the story about his family, he sets it down on the table. Listen, over 400 years since the Inquisition, we have kept this. Its power is dark and terrible. Jacob tries to touch it, and his father swats his hand away, and he says, you must never touch this thing. He actually tells him that one person in their family did touch this, and they did manage to open it, and this was his grandpa's grandpa. And after this man successfully solved it, he was never seen again, and his screams were heard in the streets for the next 6 years, which is something I've never heard in the Hellraiser universe, but a very terrifying tale to begin with. He tells Jacob about these demons that come from the box called Shedem, and he starts to begin to tell him how they eat the soul, and then afterwards, finally, the body. But couldn't we use it? In Europe, they murder us. Here, they have the Bunt, American Nazis. It's 1938. Do we still have to wait for God like in Egypt? It is not our power. Have I taught you nothing? Where are the armies that tried to kill the Jews? Egypt, Rome, nothing but dust. We survive, and that is God's will. Promise me not to touch it. And Jacob just kind of mutters a small promise, and his father will not take this at all. Jacob is inevitably forced to say, I promise out loud, but after this promise is made and we're given that introduction to Jacob and his father, we are cutting down to this bar. Now, this bar is actually a home for the Bunt, the American Nazis that this small family was talking about, and we just see this young boy just kind of working. He's putting plates away, and everybody in there and the bartender alone are just kind of trying to get him to join their group. They're taking this country away from us, Billy. Look at the radio. All Jews. George Burns, Eddie Cantor, Jack Benny. You gotta come to a meeting, Billy. But my father says the Bunt is un-American. Well, if you have to ask your daddy. No, I don't. I can do whatever I want. And as this young boy agrees to all this, they actually see Jacob and his father out in the street running their business, and they all decide to go outside and harass these people. Now, this all leads to a very terrible scene as they're all just kind of screaming these Jewish slurs and other things around that. The bartender actually hands this rock to the young boy, Billy, and he just says, what? Are you waiting for your father? And Billy is succumbing to the force of peer pressure, one much more terrible than just maybe taking a hit of a joint or taking your first sip of beer or saying a swear word for the first time. This boy grabs this rock and he actually hurls it at Jacob's dad, and it hits him directly in the forehead. This man falls to the ground and he is dead on the spot. You can tell that Billy is extremely nervous about this, and when the cops roll up, there's inevitably nothing they can do about it. Sorry, kid. They all have alibis. Your descriptions were perfect, but until we can get some proof, or someone from the neighborhood to come forward, there's just nothing we can do. And as we see Jacob shedding a tear, he ends up going home, and he's throwing this Lamarckian cube down on the ground. Now, this boy has no idea what this thing is, or what it could possibly do to him, but the interesting thing throughout this whole story is he actually never manages to open this. That's what you get waiting for God. You get killed. I'll use it once. Papa would say no. Damn it, have to find out how it works. And we're seeing the electricity start pounding out of this box. This kid cannot figure out how this thing works, and honestly, if he only knew that this was for the better, something that is literally saving his soul is not being able to solve this damn puzzle. The golem, like the stories, the golem will avenge us, avenge the Jews. Now, blood for blood. This time we won't wait for God. We'll do it without him. And Jacob pretty much giving up on opening this box altogether, we cut back to the bar, the Bunt, these people, these terrible, terrible people, and we start seeing people clamoring out. They're singing songs, they're a little bit deep in the drink, and as these two people are walking around the corner, we're starting to see people slain. We see these two men fall to the ground, and as we cut to the next couple panels, we see Billy and the bartender having themselves a nice little conversation as Billy is extremely worried about what is going to happen. He knows that he just killed this man and he does not want his father to figure out, and he generally feels bad about this. But if we get caught, I threw it. It was an accident. I didn't mean to. Billy, relax. We take care of our own. That's the way things should be. Sure, I guess, but that old guy was a Jew, and the cops don't spend their lives trying to look and figure out what happened to these people. Now go home. These things always blow over. But if my dad finds out, you're not going home to your dad. You're going to get what you gave. And around the corner, as this bartender is walking around, we see young Jacob once again holding a knife up to Billy in the secrecy of the alleyway. Huh? No, I'm sorry. It was an accident. I only wanted to. To what? To hurt him? To teach him a lesson? You Gentiles always want to teach us lessons. Don't you ever think that after all this time, we'd learn it? You know how smart we are. And we just see Billy fall to the ground with his hole punctured inside of his solar plexus, and he just says, it was an accident. I'm so sorry. And after this, Jacob just heads home. He goes up to the rooftop of his house, and he goes up to the golem. He just wants this thing to come alive so bad. He wants this thing to do the work that he's always heard in the stories. He wants it to avenge his family, that the Jewish community is no different than anybody else. They're all just human, and there's no reason to be constantly harassing these people and just basically making his life an utter hell. Just like the stories, you came to save the Jews. Come on, damn it. Treat them like they treat us. Murderers and ghettos. Come on, open. And Jacob is once again trying to open this box. He's just kind of smashing this thing against the ground, and he's getting utterly furious about it. I'll get all of them. I'll show Papa and God. The box will make me strong enough to. And as he's trying to smash this thing, we just see the cops roll up, and they tell him to put the knife away. We see Jacob in the front headlights of all these different cars, and they're all holding up their gun to him, and they just want him to stop. They have no idea what's going on, and neither does Jacob. Jacob, we know you're upset. Put the knife down. Everything's gonna be alright. Get out of here. I'm the avenger of the... Jacob, don't! And we see all these different gunshots going off, and this is probably the saddest part in the book, as this kid was just pushed to an utter point where he just couldn't stand any of this anymore, and he took things up in his own hands. But what he doesn't know is that these cops were actually coming around to say that somebody had actually came forward. He's dead. Poor kid. Captain says a witness swore out a statement. Some guy from the neighborhood could have picked up those guys tonight. Kid beat us to it. Alright folks, come on, break it up. And with Jacob now dead on the ground, and these cops just trying to shoo everybody around from this scene, we see the bartender walk up, and he actually picks up the little Marcan cube that Jacob was holding this entire time, and what do you know, he takes it off, and this is where I think that maybe in a future story we'll actually come across this bartender, or maybe find out some more history about what happened after this, as these comic books are usually pretty decent about that sort of thing. Sometimes, which I'm sure some of you actually know the lore. It is insane the amount of Hellraiser lore that you guys know. I only wish that I could contain all that into my brain. But this is not really the end of our story here. There will be one more, and I'm hoping to get that out before Christmas for everybody. But overall, I thought this was a very good story and a very neat idea, and honestly kind of a hard one. As it seems today, there's a lot of anti-Semitism going around with people like Kanye West and Nick Fuentes, and while I'm not here to get into that or sit on any political fences, as that's not what this channel is, I just thought it was such a weird coincidence that in this news cycle that's going on right now, and I picked up this story, and what do you know? It happened to also be about a bunch of totally irrational people with irrational ideas just making life an utter hell for anybody around them. That's just a little bit different for people that they don't understand, and it's just such a tragic story and something I was not expecting after that first one. It seemed like that first video that I made was very just fun and kind of lighthearted, even though it was a pretty dark story in general. It's just something that I couldn't do with this one, as it's too based in realism, and honestly something I had to record a few different times. So thank you everybody so much for watching. Tell me what you think of this particular story, and the next one is a very neat one. We're actually going to be coming across a poem configuration, which I've heard so much about, and I can't wait to actually figure out what this deal is. I've also heard of like origami configurations and all sorts of different things, but this is just one in particular that I've heard a lot about. So let me know down in the comments what you guys are thinking of this Hellraiser holiday special. Hopefully in the springtime we'll get the spring slaughter edition or whatever. And I'd also just like to thank you all for accepting that this video is going to be late. I put a community post out saying that I got some sand in my eye, and I'm feeling a lot better now, but that day that did happen, it was just too much to sit at my computer and try to like not cry while editing a video as I'm like struggling to hold my eyes open. So thank you all for being so caring, and I will see you all on the next video. And if it turns out that I'm not able to hit that next video by Christmas time, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and I cannot wait for the new year and what's to come. I got some really good stuff coming up after all this Hellraiser stuff, and I can't wait to be with you all, sharing some cool stories and talking down in the comments. Who knows, maybe someday we can create a Discord server and I can actually talk to one of you people. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you on the next episode of From the Heart. Alright, I'm gonna do the thing now where I walk away.